The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species and civilizations that had risen, fallen, and thrived across the stars. Among them, humanity was considered an oddity, fragile yet resilient, primitive yet innovative. Humans were often seen as insignificant compared to the towering strength of alien empires or the ancient wisdom of elder races. But on one fateful day, everything changed. In a quiet corner of space known as Sector 42, a small human colony named Haven orbited a dying star. It wasn't much, a few thousand settlers trying to carve out a life amidst barren planets and asteroid fields, but it was home for those who lived there. Among these settlers was a young man named Ethan. He wasn't remarkable by any stretch of the imagination. Average height, brown hair, calloused hands from years of working in the mining rigs, he blended into the crowd like sand on a beach. Ethan's days were simple. Wake up early, work long hours repairing machinery at the colony's main facility, then head back to his modest quarters to eat dinner alone before bed. Life on Haven wasn't glamorous, but it was safe. Or so he thought. It all began when strange ships appeared in the sky without warning. Their sleek, angular designs gleamed under the dim light of the distant sun, unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Panic spread through the colony as alarms blared, and people scrambled for cover. Rumors flew about pirate raids, corporate takeovers, or even experiments gone wrong. No one expected what came next. A single ship descended, hovering silently above the colony's central plaza. Its surface shimmered with iridescent colors, shifting like oil on water. Then, a voice boomed, not through speakers, but directly into everyone's minds. It was calm, commanding, and unmistakably feminine. "Humans of Haven," the voice said, reverberating with authority. "We are the Kalari Dominion, rulers of this sector. You will surrender your strongest male specimen for evaluation. Failure to comply will result in annihilation." The colonists froze, unsure if they'd heard correctly. Strongest male? Evaluation? What did that mean? Before anyone could react, the ship released a beam of light that scanned the entire settlement. Moments later, the voice spoke again. "You," it declared, locking onto Ethan. "You will come with us." Ethan blinked, stunned. Him? Why him? He wasn't strong or brave. He barely stood out in a group photo. Yet, the beam of light enveloped him before he could protest, lifting him off the ground and pulling him toward the alien vessel. The last thing he saw before being pulled inside was the terrified faces of his fellow colonists, powerless to stop what was happening. Inside the ship, Ethan found himself surrounded by towering figures clad in ornate armor. They moved with precision, their elongated limbs and glowing eyes marking them as something otherworldly. At the center of the chamber stood a regal figure, a warrior queen, her presence radiating power. Her armor sparkled with intricate patterns, and her gaze pierced through Ethan like a blade. "Subject identified," she announced, her voice colder than before. "Genetic analysis confirms superior traits. Prepare for transport." Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could he say? He was just a mechanic from a forgotten colony, now caught in the crosshairs of some cosmic drama he didn't understand. As the ship surged forward, leaving Haven behind, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his life would never be the same again. Little did he know, the Kalari weren't the only ones interested in him. Across the galaxy, whispers of humanity's supreme genetics were spreading, drawing the attention of empires both benevolent and cruel. Ethan was about to become the most important, and most hunted, man in the universe. Ethan's mind raced as he tried to make sense of his new reality. One moment, he had been repairing a broken conveyor belt in the colony's mining facility. The next, he was aboard an alien warship hurtling through space, surrounded by towering warriors who seemed to regard him as some kind of prize. His heart pounded in his chest, and every instinct screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. The walls of the chambers shimmered faintly, pulsing with energy that felt alive, almost sentient. The warrior queen stepped closer, her armor glinting under the soft light of the ship's interior. She studied him intently, her glowing eyes scanning every inch of his body as if she could see past his skin to the very core of his being. Ethan swallowed hard, trying to muster some semblance of courage. What do you want from me?" he stammered, his voice trembling. The Queen tilted her head slightly, as though amused by his question. "You are unique," she said, her tone devoid of emotion. "Your genetic structure contains elements we have not encountered before, traits that could prove invaluable to our species." "Invaluable how?" Ethan asked, his confusion mingling with fear. "I'm just a mechanic. I fix things. I'm not special." The Queen's lips curled into what might have been a smile, or a sneer. "Special is relative. To us, your genetic makeup represents potential. Potential for strength, resilience, adaptability. Traits we require to ensure the survival of our lineage." Before Ethan could respond, the chamber shifted around him. The walls dissolved into a holographic display, showing images of sprawling battlefields, vast armies clashing beneath alien skies, and towering fortresses carved into mountains of crystal. At the center of it all stood the Kalari, their dominance over other species evident in every frame. "Our empire thrives on conquest," the Queen explained. "But even the strongest must evolve to survive. Your DNA holds keys to unlocking abilities beyond what we currently possess. That is why you were chosen." Chosen. The word echoed in Ethan's mind. He didn't feel chosen, he felt abducted, terrified, completely out of his depth. But before he could protest further, the chamber transformed again. This time, he found himself standing in a stark, sterile room filled with strange devices and glowing panels. Several Kalari warriors moved about, adjusting settings and preparing equipment. "What's going on?" Ethan demanded, taking a step back. "What are you going to do to me?" The Queen gestured toward the machines. "We will test you. Endurance, intelligence, combat capability, all aspects of your physiology will be evaluated. If you meet our standards, you may yet prove useful." Useful. The word grated on Ethan. He wasn't some tool to be measured and dissected. But as much as he wanted to resist, he knew he had no choice. The Kalari were clearly more advanced than humanity, and any attempt to fight back would end badly, for him and possibly for Haven. The first test began almost immediately. A platform rose from the floor, its surface covered in shifting patterns of light. Ethan hesitated, unsure what to do, until one of the warriors prodded him forward with a spear-like weapon. Reluctantly, he stepped onto the platform, and instantly regretted it. A surge of energy coursed through his body, forcing him to his knees. It wasn't painful exactly, but it was overwhelming, like every nerve ending in his body was firing at once. Images flooded his mind, memories of his childhood, moments of triumph and failure, fears he'd buried deep within himself. When the sensation finally subsided, Ethan collapsed, gasping for air. "Interesting," the Queen remarked, watching him closely. "Your neural pathways are highly adaptable. Most subjects would have succumbed to sensory overload." Ethan struggled to stand, his legs shaky beneath him. "Is that supposed to mean something?" "It means you are stronger than you appear," she replied. "Now let us proceed." The tests grew progressively more intense. In one trial, Ethan was placed in a simulated combat scenario against holographic opponents. Despite his lack of training, he managed to evade their attacks using quick reflexes and sheer determination. In another, he solved complex puzzles designed to assess problem-solving skills, surprising both himself and his captors with his ingenuity. Through it all, the Queen observed silently, her expression unreadable. Ethan couldn't tell whether she was pleased or disappointed, but he refused to give up. Every challenge was a chance to prove he wasn't just some lab rat to be experimented on. He was a person, with thoughts and feelings and a will to survive. As the final test approached, Ethan braced himself for whatever horrors awaited him. The room darkened, and a low hum filled the air. From the shadows emerged a massive creature, a biomechanical monstrosity with razor-sharp claws and glowing red eyes. It lunged at him without warning, forcing him to dive out of the way. Ethan scrambled to his feet, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He grabbed a discarded metal rod from the floor and swung it wildly, barely managing to deflect the creature's strikes. Each blow sent shockwaves through his arms, threatening to knock him off balance. But somehow, he held his ground, dodging and striking with desperate precision. Finally, with a well-timed swing, he shattered the creature's armored head, causing it to collapse into a heap of sparking circuits and twisted metal. Panting heavily, Ethan dropped the rod and fell to his knees, utterly spent. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the Queen stepped forward, her gaze fixed on him with renewed interest. "You have exceeded expectations," she said, her voice tinged with approval. "Perhaps humanity's reputation as weak and insignificant has been misplaced." Ethan looked up at her, his chest heaving. "Does this mean I pass?" The Queen nodded slowly. "Indeed. But your journey is far from over. There are others who seek what we seek, and they will not show mercy." Before Ethan could ask what she meant, the ship shuddered violently, throwing him off balance. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered. The Queen turned sharply toward the control panel, her expression grim. "We are under attack," she announced. "Prepare yourself, human. This is only the beginning." The ship rocked violently as another explosion tore through its hull, sending sparks flying and alarms screaming. Ethan stumbled, barely managing to catch himself against a nearby console. His heart raced, not from the test this time, but from sheer terror. Whatever was attacking the Kalari vessel was powerful enough to shake the entire structure, and he had no idea what it meant for him. "What's happening?" Ethan shouted over the chaos, his voice barely audible above the din. The warrior queen ignored him, barking orders in her melodic yet authoritative language to the other Kalari warriors. They moved with practiced efficiency, activating defensive systems and preparing weapons. But despite their apparent strength, the ship continued to shudder under relentless assault. "Who's attacking us?" Ethan pressed again, his eyes darting between the Queen and the glowing panels that displayed incomprehensible data. Before she could answer, a massive blast shook the ship, knocking Ethan off his feet. He hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his side. As he struggled to get up, a booming voice echoed into the chamber, not telepathically this time, but through external speakers. "Kalari scum," the voice growled, deep and guttural. "Hand over the human, or your empire will burn." Ethan froze. The human? Did they mean him? His stomach churned at the realization. Whoever these attackers were, they wanted him just as badly as the Kalari did, and judging by the ferocity of their attack, they weren't planning to ask nicely. The Queen turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Stay close," she commanded sharply. "If you value your life, do not stray from my side." Without waiting for a response, she grabbed Ethan by the arm and pulled him toward an exit. Her grip was firm, almost painful, but Ethan didn't resist. He had no illusions about his chances of surviving on his own in the middle of an interstellar battle. For now, sticking with the Kalari seemed like the safer option, even if they weren't exactly friendly allies. They sprinted through narrow corridors lined with pulsating energy conduits, the walls vibrating with each new impact. Warriors rushed past them in both directions, some carrying heavy weapons, others dragging wounded comrades. The air was thick with tension, charged with the metallic scent of burning circuits and ozone. As they reached what appeared to be a secondary command center, the Queen stopped abruptly. She released Ethan and began issuing rapid-fire commands to her subordinates in their alien tongue. One of the warriors handed her a sleek device that resembled a gauntlet, which she strapped onto her forearm with practiced ease. "We must evacuate," she said, glancing at Ethan. "This ship cannot withstand much more." "Evacuate where?" Ethan asked, panic rising in his chest. "And why are they after me?" "There is no time for explanations," she snapped, her patience wearing thin. "Suffice it to say, your existence has drawn the attention of forces far greater than you can comprehend. Now come!" She led him to a smaller shuttle docked within the larger vessel. The sleek craft looked designed for speed rather than comfort, its surface covered in sharp edges and glowing runes. As they boarded, Ethan noticed several injured Kalari warriors already inside, tending to their wounds. Once everyone was secured, the shuttle detached from the main ship with a jarring lurch. Through the viewport, Ethan caught a glimpse of their attackers, massive ships bristling with cannons and jagged protrusions that gave them the appearance of predatory beasts. Their hulls glowed faintly red, casting an ominous light across the battlefield. "Who are they?" Ethan whispered, unable to tear his gaze away from the monstrous vessels. "The Vorthak Horde," the Queen replied grimly. "A brutal race of conquerors who see all others as prey. If they capture you, they will dissect you piece by piece to unlock your secrets." Ethan swallowed hard, bile rising in his throat. "Why does everyone suddenly care so much about me? I'm nobody." "You are wrong," the Queen said, her tone softening ever so slightly. "You represent potential, a genetic key that could tip the balance of power in this galaxy. That makes you worth fighting for, and killing for." The shuttle accelerated, weaving through debris fields left behind by the ongoing battle. Explosions lit up the void around them, illuminating the twisted remains of destroyed ships. Despite the chaos outside, the interior of the shuttle remained eerily quiet, save for the occasional groan of an injured warrior. Suddenly, a bright flash filled the viewport as one of the Vorthak ships unleashed a devastating salvo. The shuttle lurched violently, throwing Ethan to the floor once again. Sparks flew from a damaged panel nearby, and smoke began filling the cabin. "We're losing power!" one of the warriors shouted, frantically working to stabilize the craft. "Redirect auxiliary systems to propulsion," the Queen ordered, her voice cutting through the panic. "We must reach the jump point before they intercept us." Ethan scrambled to his feet, gripping a nearby seat for support. His mind raced with questions, fears, and a growing sense of helplessness. How had his life spiraled so completely out of control? And how was he supposed to survive when entire civilizations seemed intent on tearing him apart? Just as the shuttle reached what appeared to be a safe distance, a shadow loomed ahead. A Vorthak fighter emerged from the darkness, its crimson hull gleaming menacingly. It fired a volley of missiles, forcing the shuttle into evasive maneuvers. "We won't make it!" Ethan cried, clutching the seat tightly. The Queen's eyes narrowed, her expression resolute. "We will. Hold on." With a final burst of speed, the shuttle entered a swirling vortex of light, the jump point. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of colors as the craft hurtled through hyperspace, leaving the battle far behind. For the first time since being taken from Haven, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. They had escaped, for now. But he knew the reprieve wouldn't last long. The Vorthak Horde wouldn't give up so easily, and neither would the Kalari. Wherever this journey led, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The shuttle emerged from hyperspace, its battered frame groaning as it slowed to a halt. Ethan blinked rapidly, his eyes adjusting to the dim light of the cabin after the blinding swirl of colors during the jump. For a moment there was silence, broken only by the faint hum of the engines and the ragged breathing of the Kalari warriors recovering from their injuries. Through the viewport, Ethan caught sight of their destination, a massive, irregularly shaped asteroid floating amidst a field of debris. Its surface was pockmarked with craters and jagged ridges, but nestled within one of its larger crevices was a sprawling structure, a fortress carved directly into the rock. Lights flickered along its edges, casting an eerie glow that made the place look both ancient and alive. "This is our refuge," the Queen announced, her voice steady despite the tension still lingering in the air. "A hidden stronghold where we can regroup and plan our next move." Ethan stared at the fortress, his mind racing. It didn't seem like much of a safe haven, it looked more like the kind of place nightmares were born. But he had no choice but to trust the Kalari for now. After all, they had saved him from the Vorthak Horde, at least temporarily. As the shuttle docked inside the fortress, Ethan followed the Queen and the other warriors through a series of narrow tunnels leading deeper into the structure. The walls were lined with glowing crystals embedded into the stone, casting shifting patterns of light across the floor. The air was cool and damp, carrying a faint metallic tang that reminded him of Haven's mining rigs. They eventually entered a large chamber filled with advanced technology far beyond anything Ethan had ever seen. Holographic displays hovered in midair, showing maps of star systems, schematics of alien ships, and streams of data scrolling too fast for him to read. In the center of the room stood a towering console surrounded by Kalari technicians, who worked tirelessly to analyze incoming information. The Queen approached the console, issuing commands in her melodic language. One of the technicians nodded and activated a hologram, projecting a detailed image of the galaxy. Several points on the map glowed red, marking areas controlled by the Vorthak horde. "Their forces are spreading quickly," the Queen said, turning to address Ethan. "We cannot return to Kalari space without risking further conflict. For now, this fortress will serve as our base of operations." "What about me?" Ethan asked hesitantly. "What happens next?" The Queen regarded him thoughtfully, her glowing eyes piercing through him once again. "You will remain here under my protection, for now. Your presence has already drawn too much attention. If the Vorthak discover this location, you must be prepared to defend yourself." "Defend myself?" Ethan echoed, incredulous. "Against what? I'm not a soldier." "You may not have been trained for combat," the Queen replied, her tone firm. "But your genetic potential suggests otherwise. We will teach you how to harness your abilities, how to fight, survive, and adapt." Before Ethan could protest further, another Kalari warrior entered the chamber, carrying a small device that resembled a scanner. The Queen gestured for Ethan to step forward, and reluctantly he complied. The warrior waved the scanner over his body, collecting data that appeared on a nearby display. "These readings confirm what we suspected," the Queen said after studying the results. "Your cellular structure is highly resilient. With proper training, you could withstand conditions that would kill most beings." Ethan felt a mix of awe and dread. On one hand, it was strange, and slightly thrilling, to think he might possess some hidden strength. On the other hand, being thrust into the role of some kind of galactic savior terrified him. He wasn't a hero, he was just a mechanic from a backwater colony. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself subjected to rigorous training sessions designed to push his limits. The Kalari warriors took turns teaching him basic combat techniques, endurance exercises, and even rudimentary piloting skills. At first, Ethan struggled, his lack of experience making every task feel insurmountable. But slowly he began to improve. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Ethan collapsed onto a bench in the fortress's central courtyard. The area was open to the sky above, revealing a breathtaking view of stars twinkling against the blackness of space. Exhausted but determined, he gazed upward, wondering if he'd ever see Earth, or Haven, again. "You're doing better than you realize," a voice said softly. Ethan turned to see one of the younger Kalari warriors standing nearby. Unlike the others, she wore lighter armor and carried herself with a more approachable demeanor. Her name, he had learned earlier, was Lyra. "I don't feel like I'm improving," Ethan admitted, rubbing his sore muscles. "Every time I think I'm getting somewhere, I mess something up." Lyra sat beside him, her movements graceful yet deliberate. "You underestimate yourself. Most humans would have broken under the pressure you've faced. Yet here you are, still standing. I don't really have a choice, do I?" Ethan muttered bitterly. "Everyone wants me for some reason I barely understand. If I stop fighting, I'm dead." "That's true," Lyra acknowledged. "But survival isn't the only reason you keep going. Deep down, you want to protect those who can't protect themselves, including your people back on Haven." Her words struck a chord deep within Ethan. She was right. He couldn't forget about Haven, or the terrified faces of his fellow colonists when the Kalari abducted him. If he gave up now, what hope did they have? "Why are you helping me?" Ethan asked suddenly, turning to face her. "You're risking everything just because of my genes?" Lyra hesitated, her expression softening. "Not just because of your genes. My queen sees potential in you, a chance to secure a future for our people. But I see something else. Courage. Determination. Qualities that remind me of why we fight. For the first time since being taken from his home, Ethan felt a flicker of purpose. Maybe he wasn't just a pawn in some cosmic game. Maybe he could make a difference, not just for himself, but for everyone counting on him. But as comforting as Lyra's words were, Ethan knew the danger hadn't passed. Somewhere out there, the Vorthak horde was hunting them. And sooner or later they would find this fortress. When that day came, Ethan vowed silently he wouldn't run. He would stand and fight, for Haven, for humanity, and for the fragile hope of a better future. Days turned into weeks as Ethan adapted to life within the Kalari fortress. His training intensified, pushing him harder than ever before. Each day brought new challenges: sparring matches with Lyra, simulated combat scenarios in high-tech arenas, and lessons in strategy and diplomacy from the Queen herself. Slowly but surely, Ethan began to transform. His body grew leaner and stronger, his reflexes sharper, and his confidence steadier. Yet, despite these changes, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of his mind. Something didn't feel right. It wasn't just the constant threat of the Vorthak horde or the weight of expectations placed upon him by the Kalari. It was subtler, a sense that not everyone shared the same vision for humanity's role in this galactic drama. Ethan noticed it first in small ways: whispered conversations between warriors that stopped abruptly when he entered a room, sidelong glances exchanged during meetings, and an undercurrent of tension whenever the Queen mentioned future plans. One evening, after another grueling session in the training arena, Ethan decided to confront Lyra about his suspicions. They were alone in the central courtyard, the starry expanse above them casting faint light over the jagged walls of the fortress. "Lyra," Ethan began, his tone cautious. "Can I ask you something?" She looked up from sharpening her blade, her glowing eyes meeting his. "Of course. What is it?" "Do all the Kalari agree with your Queen's decision to protect me?" he asked bluntly. "Or am I just useful until I'm not anymore?" Lyra hesitated, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she said nothing, focusing instead on the rhythmic motion of her blade against the whetstone. Finally, she sighed and set the weapon aside. "There are divisions among us," she admitted quietly. "Some believe the risks outweigh the rewards, that protecting you puts our empire at too great a disadvantage. Others see you as a symbol of hope, a chance to evolve and grow stronger." "And what do you believe?" Ethan pressed, leaning forward slightly. "I believe my Queen knows what she's doing," Lyra replied firmly, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in her voice. "But even she cannot hold off dissent forever." Ethan frowned, his unease deepening. "Dissent? You mean rebellion?" Before Lyra could answer, a sudden commotion erupted from deeper within the fortress. Shouts echoed through the tunnels, followed by the unmistakable sound of weapons firing. Ethan sprang to his feet, adrenaline surging through him. "What's happening?" he demanded. Lyra grabbed her blade and stood beside him, her posture tense. "Stay close. This isn't good." They hurried toward the source of the disturbance, arriving in the main chamber to find chaos unfolding. A group of Kalari warriors, led by a tall, imposing figure clad in black armor, had surrounded the Queen. Their weapons were drawn, their expressions grim and resolute. The leader stepped forward, addressing the Queen with barely concealed hostility. "My Queen," he said, his voice cold and mocking, "your obsession with this human has cost us dearly. The Vorthak grow bolder by the day, and our resources dwindle. Enough is enough." The Queen's stance remained regal, her gaze unwavering. "You would defy me, Commander Zarek? Overthrow millennia of tradition for short-sighted ambition? This is not defiance, it is survival," Zarek shot back. "We must cut our losses and focus on reclaiming our territory. Let the Vorthak take their prize if they desire him so badly." "No!" the Queen snapped, her voice cutting like a blade. "He is ours to protect. To abandon him now would be to betray everything we stand for." Zarek sneered, turning his attention to Ethan. "And what exactly does he offer us? Hope? Potential? Or merely a distraction while our enemies close in?" Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He had never wanted any of this, to be a pawn in some interstellar power struggle, but here he was, caught in the middle of a civil war. Enough! The Queen commanded, raising her hand. A pulse of energy rippled outward, forcing Zarek and his followers to stagger backward. If you will not stand with me, then leave. But know this, any who side with the Vorthak will face the full wrath of the Kalari Dominion. For a moment, no one moved. Then, with a snarl, Zarek signaled to his forces, and they retreated into the shadows of the fortress. The tension in the chamber eased slightly, but the damage was done. The unity of the Kalari was fractured, and Ethan knew their position was more precarious than ever. Once the rebels had disappeared, the Queen turned to Ethan, her expression grim. This changes nothing. We will continue as planned. But you must be prepared for anything. Ethan nodded, though his mind raced with questions. Could they survive both the Vorthak and their own kind? And how long could the Queen keep her loyalists united? As the days passed, the atmosphere in the fortress grew increasingly tense. Patrols doubled, and security measures tightened. Ethan trained harder than ever, knowing that every skill he learned might mean the difference between life and death. Still, the shadow of betrayal loomed large over everything. Then, one night, disaster struck. An alarm blared through the fortress, jolting Ethan awake. He grabbed the makeshift weapon he'd been given, a sturdy metal staff, and rushed outside. Flames licked at the edges of the courtyard, and smoke filled the air. Warriors scrambled to defend the stronghold, but it was clear they were outnumbered. Through the chaos, Ethan spotted Lyra battling a group of invaders. Her movements were precise and deadly, but she was tiring fast. Without thinking, Ethan charged forward, swinging his staff with newfound strength and precision. Together, they managed to drive the attackers back, but the victory was short-lived. As Ethan turned to check on Lyra, he saw Zarek emerge from the smoke, his black armor gleaming menacingly. In his hand, he held a device that pulsed with ominous energy. You should have fled when you had the chance, human, Zarek growled, aiming the device at Ethan. Time seemed to slow as Ethan realized what was about to happen. With a roar, he lunged forward, desperate to stop the traitorous commander. But before he could reach him, a blinding flash engulfed the battlefield. When the light faded, Ethan found himself standing in an unfamiliar place, a barren wasteland beneath twin suns. Beside him lay Lyra, unconscious but alive. And in the distance, silhouetted against the fiery horizon, stood the unmistakable shapes of Vorthak ships descending like vultures. Zarek had betrayed them, not just to the Vorthak, but to their doom. Ethan's heart pounded as he stared at the approaching Vorthak ships, their jagged forms casting long shadows across the desolate landscape. The air was thick with heat and tension, the twin suns beating down mercilessly on the barren wasteland. His mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. One moment, he'd been fighting alongside Lyra in the fortress. The next, Zarek's betrayal had left them stranded, vulnerable, and surrounded by enemies. Lyra! Ethan shouted, dropping to his knees beside her unconscious form. He shook her gently, his voice tinged with desperation. Wake up! We don't have much time! Her eyes fluttered open, and for a brief second, relief washed over Ethan. But it was short-lived. Lyra groaned, clutching her side where a fresh wound bled freely. She struggled to sit up, her glowing eyes narrowing as she took in their dire situation. The device, she muttered weakly. Zarek used a teleportation pulse. He's abandoned us here. Abandoned us? Ethan echoed, anger flaring inside him. More like handed us over to the Vorthak on a silver platter. The sound of engines grew louder as the first wave of Vorthak fighters touched down nearby. Massive, insect creatures emerged from the ships, their armored exoskeletons glinting menacingly in the sunlight. They moved with predatory grace, their sharp mandibles clicking ominously as they scanned the area. We need to move, Lyra said urgently, forcing herself to stand despite her injuries. If we stay here, we're dead. Ethan nodded, helping her steady herself. Together, they sprinted toward the nearest ridge, seeking cover among the jagged rocks scattered across the terrain. The Vorthak were fast, but so was adrenaline. Every step felt like fire coursing through Ethan's legs, yet he pushed forward, driven by sheer willpower. As they reached the ridge, Ethan glanced back to see the Vorthak spreading out in search patterns, their weapons primed and ready. He clenched his fists, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "What now?" he whispered harshly. "We can't fight all of them." Lyra leaned against a boulder, wincing as she adjusted her grip on her blade. "We don't have to. We just need to survive long enough to find an advantage, or help." "Help?" Ethan repeated incredulously. "Who's going to help us out here? Your queen doesn't even know where we are." Lyra hesitated, then met his gaze with determination. "She'll come. She has to. Until then, we rely on ourselves." Ethan wanted to argue, to scream that they were completely alone, but there wasn't time. A loud screech pierced the air as one of the Vorthak spotted them, pointing its weapon in their direction. Without hesitation, Lyra shoved Ethan behind another rock just as a bolt of energy seared past, leaving a smoking crater in the ground. "They found us!" Lyra hissed. "Keep moving!" They scrambled further along the ridge, using the natural formations as cover while the Vorthak closed in. Each blast that struck near them sent shards of rock flying, forcing Ethan to duck and weave frantically. Despite his training, fear clawed at his chest, threatening to overwhelm him. This wasn't a simulation or a sparring match, it was life or death. Suddenly, inspiration struck. Remembering the lessons Lyra had taught him about exploiting terrain, Ethan spotted a narrow crevice ahead. It was risky, but it might buy them some time. "This way," he urged, pulling Lyra toward the gap. She followed without question, trusting his judgment. Inside the crevice, the space was tight and dark, shielding them from view. The Vorthak prowled outside, their guttural growls echoing off the rocks. Ethan held his breath, pressing himself flat against the wall as one of the creatures sniffed the air suspiciously before moving on. "They're still looking," Lyra murmured, her voice barely audible. "But they won't give up easily." Ethan nodded grimly. "Then we make them regret coming after us." Using the limited tools they had, a few throwing knives from Lyra's belt and a makeshift spear Ethan fashioned from a broken branch, they devised a plan. Working together, they set traps along the edges of the crevice, rigging loose rocks to collapse when triggered. It wasn't much, but it was something. When the Vorthak inevitably discovered their hiding spot, chaos erupted. The first creature fell victim to their trap, tumbling into a pile of rubble as the ground gave way beneath it. Its comrades roared in fury, charging recklessly into the narrow passage. Ethan and Lyra fought back fiercely, using the confined space to their advantage. Ethan swung his spear with surprising precision, taking down 2 more Vorthak before retreating deeper into the crevice. But the odds were stacked against them. For every enemy they felled, 2 more seemed to take its place. Exhaustion began to weigh heavily on both of them, their movements slowing as injuries mounted. Just as Ethan thought they couldn't hold out any longer, a deafening roar split the sky. Looking up, Ethan saw a familiar sight, the sleek, angular silhouette of a Kalari warship descending rapidly toward the battlefield. Energy beams lanced down from above, scattering the Vorthak forces and sending them scrambling for cover. Moments later, a shuttle broke away from the main ship, landing mere meters from where Ethan and Lyra stood. The Queen herself stepped out, her presence commanding and unyielding. Her eyes swept over the scene, lingering briefly on Ethan before turning to Lyra. "You live," she said simply, though there was a hint of relief in her tone. "Barely," Lyra replied, leaning heavily on Ethan for support. "Zarek betrayed us. He brought the Vorthak straight to us." The Queen's expression hardened, her jaw tightening. "Zarek's treachery will be dealt with. For now, get aboard. We leave this place." Ethan didn't need to be told twice. With Lyra's help, he boarded the shuttle, collapsing onto a seat as the craft lifted off. Through the viewport, he watched as the Kalari warship unleashed its full might upon the remaining Vorthak forces, reducing their ships to smoldering wrecks. As the shuttle docked inside the warship, Ethan finally allowed himself to breathe. They weren't safe, not yet, but they had survived. and for the first time since being abducted from Haven, he felt a glimmer of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, he could turn the tide in humanity's favor. But as the Queen approached him, her gaze intense and calculating, Ethan realized the battle was far from over. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it head on, with courage, resilience, and the knowledge that he wasn't alone.